Hey friends, it's Sarah, and today I wanted to talk about fashion. So I am by no means a fashion person. I wear like graphic t-shirts, plaid shirts, and jeans like 90% of my life. I don't know anything about fashion, but I do love watching the Met Gala and seeing all the beautiful outfits and also judging them a little bit and going, that's not on theme, even though I know nothing about this and really should not be making these judgments. So I figured this year I would read up about fashion, about like Anna Wintour, who puts on the Met Gala, about the theme, which this year is Karl Lagerfeld, so that I can fully appreciate the show and pass more reasonable judgments. Because what is the internet for if not judging people? But I figured I would have a little bit more education about it, learn a little bit more, and then I can better understand what people were doing with this. Also, fair warning, there's going to be a bunch of references to The Devil Wears Prada because aside from the Met Gala, that is my only experience with fashion in this. So let's talk about these books. So the Met Gala is held the first Monday in May every year, I think except 2020 because of the pandemic, it was in September, but it is a big charity event, a big gala held for the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York's Costume Institute. It raises money for them so that they can collect and curate and preserve fashion, basically. And it is thrown by Anna Wintour and Vogue, and she invites all these celebrities and like handpicks who gets to come, and then there's people who are brought in by designers, and tickets are like $1 million, maybe not, they're like I think like $10,000 or something. It's for the rich. It's some rich people shit, y'all. But it also always has a theme, and that's usually related to an exhibit that or maybe always related to an exhibit that the Met has showcasing. So like in 2019, the theme was camp, notes on fashion, and then that was the exhibit as well that was being shown in the Met. And I actually got to see it that summer, so that was like really cool. I got to go see some of the outfits, and it was really cool. And I highly recommend going to the Met if you're in New York City. So every year there's a different theme, and so it's a chance for designers to like showcase fashion, and a lot of times celebrities show up just in like pretty gowns, and you're like, what the heck is going on? This is not on theme. It's just something you wear on a red carpet. So I want to do like a little shout out to some celebrities who really like nailed the theme. Zendaya every year, but especially in 2019 with that Cinderella outfit. Put a little video where you can see it changing. Billy Porter in 2019, actually 2019, just like almost everyone in 2019, like Darren Criss, Janelle Monáe, just all did exquisite work in 2019. Such a good theme, so many opportunities for great outfits. Blake Lively in 2018, as well as 2022, Lena Waithe in 2018, Lizzo and Quanta Chasing Horse in 2022. Just so many like excellent outfits. Rihanna always does an amazing job as well. I'm really excited to see what people are doing this year. The like guest list is always secret, so you don't know who's going to show up until they show up on the red carpet. Also, no one knows what happens inside the Met Gala. There's like someone performs, there's usually a big like musical act, and I think there's a dinner, and the people get to like see the exhibit. But if you don't go to the Met, you don't know what happens at the gala. Because again, it's rich people shit. So this year's theme is Karl Lagerfeld, a line of beauty, and he was a like huge, super iconic designer for Chanel, Fendi, Chloe, and he also had his own Karl Lagerfeld line, and he died in 2019, so this is kind of honoring his legacy. This apparently, I did not know this until I started like reading these books and researching for this video, but this was a very controversial choice because the man said problematic shit. He was an old white dude, so of course he did. In 2009, made some like pretty fat phobic comments. He said no one wants to see a curvy woman. He'd made other comments to that effect before, only hiring really thin models, which is common in the industry, but is still yikes. He also commented on Adele's weight. Eesh. And then in 2018, he said he was fed up with the Me Too movement. Also horrifying. He also made comments that this like thing around sexual assault would harm his creative freedom, and was like, yeah, that's more important than women being sexually harassed. Also horrifying. He said something about like, if you're a model and you don't want your pants grabbed, then you should be in this career, you should be in like a nunnery. So bad. Just like some really bad takes. He also made racist remarks about Muslim immigrants coming to France, and he was against gay marriage despite being gay himself. Riddle me that. I don't know how that works. I think he got a lot of slack because the fashion industry is very insular and they're very tight-knit, and he's so influential. And also he was known for like really like cutting and like pithy remarks. So they're like, oh, just Karl being Karl, saying controversial things. And it's one thing to be like mean in kind of like a funny way, and completely another to be excusing sexual assault or being like fatphobic or racist or homophobic. I don't even know how to classify that part about being against gay marriage. It's just weird. So there's a bit of controversy around this choice to honor his creative legacy despite all the problematic things he had said in his past. And I don't know. I'm not going to say whether it was right or wrong. That's not on me. I am not really in the fashion space. I can see both sides of it. Of he was really problematic, said lots of bad things. Also, he was a very revolutionary designer, and they're honoring his art form. I don't know. Just wanted to talk about that and kind of express that that was happening and that I was aware of it. But for now, let's move on to the books. I read several books about like Anna Wintour, Vogue, Karl Lagerfeld, but then I also read some more kind of out there books, if you will, where they're not focusing just on like the haute couture fashion world. And so I think we're gonna start there and kind of like close our way in. All right, so I read Dressing the Resistance, The Visual Language of Protest Through History by Camille Benda, and this was so good. This I gave 4 stars. The design of it is incredible. It feels like walking through an incredibly well-curated museum exhibit, and I learned so much from this book. It doesn't really focus on like mainstream fashion, but more how protest groups have used fashion to further their causes. So for example, there was a part in this where they talked about how using kind of like everyday clothing was a big part of some revolutions. For example, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., and other civil rights activists would dress in like the standard everyday businessman suit to kind of blend in with white society, making a point that they were not second-class citizens like they were treated as, but that they were people, just like everyone else, just like white men. They were men, and they deserved to be treated equally. The author then contrasted this with the alt-right movements and how they dress in like the polos and the khakis to make themselves seem inoffensive and harmless to further spread their message, and kind of the juxtaposition of using that like standard kind of everyman outfit to show, hey, like I'm human, please treat me one, versus like, hey, I'm just like your next door neighbor and you should trust me and believe the horrifying things I'm saying. So I thought that was just so fascinating, of using this, not even like fashion, but just like using these regular clothes to transmit this message of like I'm safe and I'm a person, but for 2 very different end goals. Another thing that was interesting here was the way that she talked about costumes. There's a quote that says, "Inside a costume, the wearer becomes a character transcending their daily life and empowered to break social codes and expectations." So in it, she talks about everything from like drag queens to women's rights activists dressing as suffragettes to kind of put this point across of it feeling like, you know, the beginning of the women's rights movement. And I just thought this had such an interesting explanation of the way that you can use fashion to both camouflage and stand out, and that both of those can be used in different ways to achieve the same goal when fighting for the same cause. And it was just utterly fascinating. I would highly recommend this. I think it's a great starting point, and then going off of like the references and stuff in here, you can like dive further into the use of fashion and costumes and clothing in whatever direction you'd like. I also learned that the peace sign, like the circle with the little line Y sort of thing in it, That actually comes from the semaphore symbols for nuclear and disarmament put together, and now it is like one of the most recognizable symbols in the world. Fascinating. I just thought it was a fun symbol. Didn't realize it had any meaning. There's also a really interesting piece about military veterans who took their old uniforms and turned them into paper. So it's called combat paper, and it teaches military veterans to recycle their old uniforms into pulp through the art of paper making, and then they can put, there's one guy who puts like pictures and words on the paper that he's made out of his uniform. It says, they unravel the story of the fiber, the blood, sweat, and tears, the months of hardship and brutal violence that are held within those uniforms, to transform the uniform into paper, to remake it, to change all previous relationships to it into your own, and to change your relationship to the memories brought up by it. How you're treated, the things that you've done or seen or done to others, that's what combat paper is interested in. So, just thought it was just very interesting and such a different take on military uniforms. I can't recommend this enough. It's very interesting. It's got excellent design in it, the photos and everything. It's great. I learned a lot. So up next, I read Modesty, a Fashion Paradox by Hafsa Lodi. And this one was also very interesting because it showed kind of an opposite side of the normal fashion that we see. So like a lot of fashion has a lot of like bearing of the skin. It's like, how much can you get away with? It's very, not quite like risque, but there is a tendency to like cover less, show more. How much can you get away with pushing those kind of boundaries? Thinking of like Rihanna in that Swarovski crystal dress where you could just like didn't really cover anything, or like the cutouts you see on the red carpet. I feel like the Hadids and like the Kardashians and stuff wear those a lot. But this is a book that talks about the modest fashion movement, which is kind of a protest against those trends towards like revealing more and having to show off your body, and the sexualization and objectification of women's bodies. They say that it is a protest against the like sex sales mentality of the mainstream fashion industry. And this book focused primarily on Muslim fashion designers because those are the people who are at the forefront of this movement. And really the impetus for this was the desire for Muslim women to have like fashionable clothing that they could wear, that they didn't have to like layer like crazy, and that was like modest and fit their worldviews and their beliefs and the image they want to convey themselves without being just like a sack. Basically, they didn't want it to be plain and boring. They wanted to show that they could still be fashionable without showing off their bodies. I really related to the part where they were talking about how it can be really difficult to find clothes in the mainstream stores that weren't like super tight or super revealing or like really like cropped and short, because even though I'm not really like a modest dresser per se, I also want to be able to find a shirt that I don't have to put another shirt under in order to go out into public. And sometimes it can be really hard to find like a sweater that's not cropped, and I'm like, it's a sweater. I'm trying to use it to keep warm. Why does it end at my rib cage? That's not gonna keep me warm. So I really related to that part where they're like, so much fashion is just like see-through or short or tight, and it's really hard to find things that will fit into like what they want to wear. They talked about how modest fashion has kind of become more prevalent in the past few years. I think starting like 2018 or something, they're saying like modest fashion is becoming more popular, more mainstream, less like niche. But it was also saying that's not because big designers necessarily want to be like more diverse or more inclusive. What they really want is to attract the super lucrative Middle East market, which is primarily Muslim. So in order to get their money, which they have a lot of, they are trending more towards modest fashion, which I thought was really interesting because primarily fashion is a business. You need to sell your clothes so you can make more clothes. There was an interesting discussion at the beginning of the book around the term modest fashion and how some people feel that by calling it modest fashion makes all other fashion immodest and casts a sort of judgment on people who don't wear modest fashion. And they kind of discussed that a little bit and were like, that's fair, but like there's not really a better term, and that's not really an important discussion when we're talking about like how to provide clothes for women who want to cover more of their bodies. I feel like I learned a lot about the Muslim ideas around modesty, and one of the more interesting things I thought was the differing opinions within the Muslim community of what it means to be modest. So there are some people who believe that just the whole idea of fashion is immodest because you are drawing attention to yourself. But the people who don't believe that are saying that they're not drawing attention like to their bodies, they are using their bodies to showcase like art, pretty much. You're like, look at this cool outfit. It's not look at my body, it's look at these cool clothes that I'm wearing and how I put them together. So it's an expression of creativity, not a like drawing of attention to yourself. It's a controversial issue within parts of the Muslim community, and I thought that was also quite interesting. My one, I think, complaint with this book was that there was a lot of like name dropping Instagram handles put in the text. So it'd be like, it read a little bit like a who's who of the modest fashion world, which was kind of cool. Gives, like, if you're really interested in that or you want to explore it more, it does give you lots of people to check out on Instagram, not just like people like influencers, but also designers and people who make like more practical things like hijab makers, or like people who make like burkinis and design more modest clothing. So it was kind of cool, but it was also like, I kind of wish that had been just like a glossary at the back and less throughout the book, because I think there were topics within the book that the author could have delved into deeper, but instead she spent time talking about like this person's business. So it was a little like, I don't know. But yeah, I think it was a very interesting contrast to like mainstream fashion and talking about this population that has been underserved by mainstream retailers and how they are trying to carve out a space for themselves. And also how like the Western world isn't really doing as good a job. There was one part where they were talking about like, oh yeah, you can see like these things and now in like H&M and like Old Navy and all sorts of like more commonplace retailers, but that are already like that in the Middle East. So they're not really drawing in that Middle East crowd, because like I can just find this at my like local market 10 times better than the like H&M version that they're producing. So that the big brands like are trying to get there, but they haven't quite hit on anything new yet. So next I read Tales from the Back Row, An Outsider's View from Inside the Fashion Industry by Amy Odell. This one felt very like Devil Wears Prada, about like kind of a normal person working in the fashion industry and being like, what's with all these crazy fashion people? Why do they do these things? Why do they wear these things? But with someone who actually has a bit of interest in fashion. It was very irreverent, sometimes like a little too snarky for my tastes, but still interesting and funny. It was more of a collection of essays of her about her time working in the industry. I thought it was going to be more of like a memoir style where there'd be a kind of like a theme running through it, a more cohesive like timeline, kind of more an overarching theme, but this was just kind of like a bunch of like little snapshots and the timeline was a little all over the place. So I was like, wait, has she already done this? Has she been there? I can't remember. I didn't enjoy that as much, but it's fine. Just know it's more kind of like a bunch of essays rather than a cohesive memoir. There were two things that really stuck out to me about this book. The first one was that there's this like lady, I can't remember what her name is, but she's like the fashion predictor of like what's going to be on trend in the next few years, and she hosts like this big conference meeting presentation thing and is like shows like a picture and like a word and like talks about how that's going to be like the fashion theme in the next year or so, and all these like heads of companies like MAC and like big fashion houses attend and then design stuff based on what she said. So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy of like, she's like, I am the fashion oracle, I declare that water and like flowy things will be in, and they're like, all right, we gotta go make a bunch of like blue flowy things. So like I don't know if she's really predicting it or she's just being like, this is what it is, guys. I don't know. That was very bizarre to me, but very interesting. The second thing that really stuck out to me was the part where she talked about Victoria's Secret fashion show, which happens every year, but I think they've stopped doing it now because Victoria's Secret got in some hot water for being, I think, fatphobic and maybe transphobic as well. I can't remember if they had some big controversy and now they're not doing it anymore. But basically she was saying that the fashion show is just a giant ad for people to buy Victoria's Secret underwear for Christmas presents. And I hadn't really ever thought of it that way, but she's right. It is just like, look at all these beautiful women wearing our clothing. You too could wear that clothing and maybe look like these women. You should buy it, or you should buy it for your girlfriend or significant other. She also discusses how the angels do like the most outrageous things to their bodies in order to prepare for this show. Like they keep in shape all the time throughout the year anyways with like fitness regimes and whatever they're eating and stuff. But then right before the show, like a few weeks or months before, they go very hard and have like these very intense workout regimes and diets that are very restrictive so that they can look itsy bitsy, super thin and skinny to walk the runway. Like there'll be people who have had babies like a couple months before and then are walking the runway looking like they've never had a baby or been pregnant in their lives. It's absolutely wild. And it's not really something that's discussed a lot. Like even in the shows, they'll show them like, oh, they're like working out, like it's so like healthy, but they're not showing the like, they're barely eating anything. They're working out like all day long so they can look unrealistically skinny and tiny to walk this runway. And it's very misleading and just not great. So I thought that was a very interesting piece to read about the frankly insane things that they do to their bodies to be able to walk in this runway. So then after that, I read Anna, the Biography by Amy Odell. This was also by Amy Odell, who wrote the previous book that I mentioned. And it was very interesting because like I said, I knew nothing about Anna Wintour except that one of her old assistants wrote The Devil Wears Prada based on her time working for Anna Wintour. Is it Anna Wintour or Anna Winter? I should look this up before I say her name like 10 more times. All right, it's Anna Wintour. So this is a book about Anna Wintour, who is the like editor-in-chief of Vogue magazine. She's kind of like the be-all end-all in the fashion industry and has incredible sway over everyone and everything. And she also is the one who throws the Met Gala and chooses all the invitees and who will perform and all that sort of thing. So she's really like the person at the center of this event. She's a Nepo baby. Ooh, what? Her dad was a journalist, was very well known in like journalism circles, and so she got a lot of opportunities based off of her father's influence and like reputation. Obviously she like worked very hard, built a really great career for herself, but she did get started in the industry because of her father's connections. These Nepo babies, they're everywhere. It was really interesting reading this book because like the author talked to people who knew Anna personally, and all throughout the book, everyone gave these really contrasting takes on her personality. Some would say she was just shy. Other people were like, nah, she's cold. Some people would say she was rude. Other people were like, no, she's just very focused on her work. And no one seems to know the truth. It wasn't that like the people who knew her best were saying one thing and then people who didn't know her as well were saying another. It was people like across all levels saying two very different things. And it's just like, who is she? I don't know. Even though it's a book that's like a tell-all, we still don't know what she's actually like, which is wild. She started in the fashion industry as an assistant, but for a smaller publication, so she actually had a lot of control and power in like fashion shoots and stuff. And considering that she came from that, she doesn't really seem to give those kind of opportunities to people in her employ. I'm sure it's different because she does run such a big publication, but like her assistants do like the Devil Wears Prada kind of work of like picking up her dry cleaning, dropping off the book at her house, and only get paid like $25,000 a year for working 12-hour days and sometimes weekends. And I'm like, Anna, did you forget your past? What's going on, girl? So it just seems like not great that she's asking this insane amount of work from these people, not giving them the opportunities, and not paying them enough, really. If you're living in New York, at $25,000, I don't think is enough to survive. She's also kind of racist and fatphobic, as a lot of people tend to be in the fashion industry. She started out like by saying like she doesn't want overweight people even like in her office, let alone on the covers or anything. Unfortunately, like I think part of it is just that she's old. So she's like 73, so she's been in the industry like her whole life, and I think it seemed in some parts of the book that she's kind of maybe not quite stuck in the past, but like a little like, this is how I've always done it, and so having a hard time adjusting it to new ideals and stuff. Not saying that it's okay to be like, I don't want fat people around me, but I think some of her more problematic views might be leftovers from when she was younger, and now that she is older, like 73, is having a hard time changing her mind. That's entirely speculation, I don't know. But based on some of the things I read in this book, that's kind of how it felt to me. One thing that they said is that she has like no patience for anything, not people, not if she was watching theater and she wasn't interested, she would just like get up and leave. And I'm like, I mean, I respect not wasting your own time, but like, whew, that's cold. What I was saying about not giving her assistants really like a leg up at all, or like chances to prove themselves in the more fashion part. She also hires lots of people who are from like the upper echelons of society, so it's a very like classist kind of industry as well. It's like, you are the daughter of this person or the son of this person, you're connected to this other person, and so that's how you get in there. It's not usually people who have just come off the street to be like hired. It's, you know, someone inside, or you're rich. So maybe that's how the assistants can make do, because they come from rich families. I don't know. It's wild. She's also like not only very influential in the fashion world, but also in like TV and Hollywood, and like everyone wants her approval. Like she would be giving approval for like movies and like TV shows. People would be like, what do you think of this? And she would give her opinion, and they would like take that very seriously, which is just wild. This woman is like the person deciding what is good and bad. Even like at the Met Gala, she approves the looks that make it onto the red carpet, which kind of then is like making me question why she approves some of these looks when they're very much not on theme. I'm like, the whole point of the Met Gala is to wear nice things that are in line with the theme. And like, Anna, are you letting us down? So if there's someone that I see who is not dressed on theme, can I then blame Anna Wintour? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. There was one quote. There were a couple quotes in this that I thought kind of summed up the whole vibe of Anna's life. So the first one was, Anna has built her own kingdom, and the world's most beautiful, most powerful people are living in it. The rest are just looking on. And then the other one was, it's not in her nature to talk about herself. So I feel like it kind of shows like the two contrasting sides of her personality. Like she lives in this kind of like bubble of all these rich, powerful, beautiful people, only hires kind of from like within that bubble, or people like on the very fringes of it. But then also she's very kind of like humble, and doesn't want to like brag or talk about herself or anything, but just wants to like produce kind of like the best creative work. So I don't know, it was very interesting to learn kind of more about her and to see these like two contrasting sides that people across her life seem to see in her. It kind of answered some questions, but it left me, I think, with even more of like, who is Anna Wintour, which I think is the kind of the vibe she's trying to cultivate. So she's succeeded. Congrats on that, girl. So the final book that I read was Paradise Now, The Extraordinary Life of Karl Lagerfeld by William Middleton. And this is a biography of Karl Lagerfeld after his death. He did die in 2019. I think I said that at the beginning of the video. I knew nothing about Karl Lagerfeld at all. Like, I recognized him. I knew he had the white ponytail and the big glasses. But other than that, I had no clue about him or his life or anything. I didn't even know he worked for Chanel. I thought he was just his own thing. Anyways, so it was very interesting to read this biography. I think there's a lot of similarities between him and Anna Wintour, just kind of like their two sides. In this book, they talked a lot about how warm and generous and kind he was to the people that he loved and in person, versus his kind of cold, kind of bitchy personality in the spotlight. He was very well known for his cutting, sassy remarks, if you will. He was very known for his cutting remarks, very witty and sharp, and apparently in person and to those he loved, he was very kind and he was very generous, he was warm, he was giving. And that reminded me a lot of the Anna Wintour as well, but more of a full distinction between personal, actual personality and public persona. He also, same as Anna, always wears the big dark sunglasses, so you can't see his eyes, can't tell where he's looking, can't tell what he's thinking. I don't know what's up with these fashion people, they're just weird. I also learned that he's very not just a fashion designer, but he was a very creative person altogether. He was interested in publishing books, he was interested in photography, he was really into 18th century art, and he collected a lot of art and home decor and furniture, and did one of his houses up as an 18th century castle. It was a castle, and then he bought all the furniture to fit in with the building itself, just rich people shit. I think the best part of this book was the chapter where the author talked about his relationship with his cat Choupette, who he acquired through kind of iffy means. A friend was like, "Hey, I'm going on vacation, can you take care of my cat?" And Karl was like, "I guess so. I don't really like pets, but sure." And then by the time the friend got back from vacation, he was like, "I am going to keep this cat because I love it, and she's my cat now," which is kind of horrifying. That poor guy who had the cat before. but like Choupette was like Karl's love, and he had hired someone like as a second housekeeper, and then he got the cat, and then she just kind of became like the cat's nanny, and that's who she lives with now. That Karl's dead, she lives with her nanny. But I just think it's hilarious that he has a whole person on staff just to look after his cat. Because, you know, if I were rich, that's what I would do too. I would just spend all my money on my cats. He was not a nepo baby, but he did come from like a fairly well-off family. There was a part in here where he said that the best thing his parents gave him was like freedom to make his own choices, not like their money. And I was like, yeah, but like that's from money. Like, you see how that's money too, right? Because if they didn't have money, you wouldn't have a choice of like what to do with your life. You have to go into a job that's going to pay well so you can help support the family. But because they have money, he had the freedom to kind of like go off and explore and have that safety net to fall back on. So I was like, no, that's still like money that they gave you that then let you have that freedom. But like it's money. It's all money. It's always money. I wanted in this, like, I know this was like a biography of his life, but I wanted more pictures of his designs, because they had like pictures of like him when he was younger with like models. They had like a couple pictures, like famous photos of models he had worked with and like chosen, but I wanted more pictures of his designs kind of within the book, because like they do describe the clothes a bit, but I find it hard to picture because I'm not really a fashion person. So what I did do actually was get what I thought was just a normal size coffee table book, but it's actually like the biggest book ever. It's literally the length of my arm, not including my hand. But this is Lagerfeld, The Chanel Shows by Simon Proctor. And it's so big. I'm gonna have to show B-roll of this because I can't show you this or it's gonna be out of frame. But this is like a big picture book from this photographer who got kind of like special access to Chanel shows. And so it doesn't really have, I thought it was going to have more pictures of the designs. It does have some pictures of designs, but it's kind of more about like the staging of the show, which again kind of ties into Karl's personality as like a very creative person, because he would also design like the sets and the ambiance and choose the music for these shows to have it be like a whole experience, cohesive collection with this like set, and it all kind of like fits together. And like looking at these pictures, I can understand why people would be so excited to go to these shows, because like I don't even care what the models are wearing. These sets are incredible, and I would also love to go to one just to be like, oh cool, he just like has a real glacier that's just like very slowly melting as these models walk around it. Oh yes, there is a giant rocket ship that looks like it's taking off at the end. Like, just so creative, so cool. Must have cost so much money. So having that book as kind of like a companion to the biography was really good for kind of visualizing the designs a little bit, and mostly like kind of the overall effect of these like shows that they would put on. The book was written by someone who knew Karl personally. Not like, they weren't like super close, but like they knew each other. They were like kind of friends. So it was obviously like an homage to Karl. There was only like one chapter that kind of was like, and here are all the weird problematic things he said. Moving on to his cat. So like, I'm glad they acknowledged it, but he didn't really like dive deep into his more problematic issues. There was a much more emphasis on like how kind he was with his friends, his relationships with various people within the industry. I also found it interesting, he had this relationship with this guy who was like a French dandy named Jacques de Bachet, who like they were like kind of like soulmates, and he loved him, but like he claims that they were never having sex. It wasn't that sort of relationship. It was like a platonic soulmate sort of thing, and like Jacques would like go out and have hookups with other people, and that never bothered Karl, but theirs was like a platonic but like emotional entanglement. And it was just kind of fascinating to like hear about this. And there are people in his life who are like, no, they were definitely like sleeping together, and other people were like, no, it was purely like just in like emotional relationship. So no one really knows the actual truth, and unfortunately Jacques did die very young of AIDS, which is very sad. But I thought that was a very interesting aspect of his life, because after Jacques died, he never really had anyone who was that close to him again until his cat Choupette, who was like kind of the other great love of his life. Like, he had lots of friends, like it's not like he was lonely necessarily, but just he had like Jacques, and then he had Choupette, and those are kind of like the two big loves of his life. I think the book did a good job of like making me really feel for Karl. And though it was quite interesting, there was like a lot of like name dropping of people in the like kind of earlier in his career that I didn't know or recognize at all. So it was very well written, and I found it interesting, but it was a little hard to get through for me just because I'm like, I don't know what that means. I don't know who that is. I don't know what's going on, where this is. So I think if you're someone who knows about the fashion industry, you'd probably enjoy it a little bit more and be more interesting and relevant to you. But because I am a complete novice and beginner at knowing anything about fashion, I was like, okay, that's fine. So now, after reading those books, as you can see, I am an absolute fashionista. I have learned all I need to about fashion, and I will be judging people at the Met Gala with reckless abandon. I know everything now, and I can fairly judge them. So I have accomplished what I wanted to with this video. I'm obviously kidding. It's just fun to watch the people in their pretty outfits and scream, "It's not on theme!" I think you can make a drinking game out of that, actually. Take a drink every time someone at the Met Gala is wearing something that's not on theme, and then you have to then look it up, and if you're wrong, take another drink. That's only if you want to get wasted. But this has been a very interesting foray into fashion. I think I would like to still read more books about it and see like a wider perspective, and maybe foray further into fashion in a written form. I don't think I'm ready to foray into haute couture or anything with my own clothes, because that sounds really expensive and like something that you have to spend a lot of time on. Anyways, thank you for joining me for this journey throughout fashion. I hope you learned some interesting facts. Let me know if you're gonna watch the Met Gala. Let me know your favorite past Met Gala look if you've watched it before. If not, I just hope this was a fun little video for you to watch, and thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Now go read a book and watch the Met Gala. I don't have the good words for that. But she was the editor-in-chief. My God. I think the job did a good job of job. Could be a model, honey. No, I couldn't. The secret fashion show. Don't talk to me anymore if you're not wearing like couture brand names. I'm above that. I'm off to New York Fashion Week. I'm gonna go to the Met Gala and judge some people.